Hello, good people. My name is Ben Shapiro and I am a philosopher, which means I'm terribly bad at building things. So what I thought we'd do is, well, deconstruct things. Many of you are probably aware of Ben Shapiro's incredibly viral video on Jubilee with, I think it was 25 Democrats going up against him, debating him on various topics. What I thought I'd do here today is shadowboxing, essentially. Like, I will show you some interesting elements that came up during the arguments and how they could have been developed and how each side could have responded. There are some pretty cool tricks here, so it's worth watching. Okay, so we're gonna talk about this part of the conversation first. This is with regards to abortion, right? Ben Shapiro is obviously pro-life, as people would call it, and his opponent is pro-choice, as we shall see. Now, this is going to take the shape of an interesting argument. It's not going to be pursued all the way to the end, but I want to show you what's happening here, and it's really cool.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
So let's say that I'm voted out by my friends here, and I stand up and immediately collapse onto the ground. Paramedics rush in, and through some magical means, they determine that the only person who can save my life is you. You can do that by giving me a transplant. Can you be forced to give me a transplant?
Here's why this is interesting. This guy here is trying a neat trick. It's been done better before, but it's a really cool trick. What this argument does is it's trying to show that sometimes the right to life does not supersede the right to freedom. So in this case, if this guy really got hurt and he needed a blood transfusion, Ben's right to freedom could, in certain circumstances, override this guy's right to life, right? Because Ben's right to be free from giving blood basically overrides this guy's right to life. Now, there are several big problems with this claim already. Later, I will show you how to make a better version of this argument, but right now, let's focus on the weakness. The weakness is this. A right to life basically means that you are forbidden from taking my life, okay? This is what a right means in this case. It doesn't mean that I have the right to force you to help me live. It only means that I have a right for you not to kill me. So just because a person is on the floor bleeding does not mean that Ben should have his right to freedom hurt to provide this guy with the right to life. This argument is a misunderstanding of rights, really, but there is a better way to make this argument, and I'll show you that in a minute.
I cannot.
Why?
Because I do not have a parental relationship with you, and thus I do not owe you a duty of care in the same way that I would if, say, you were my son.
Okay, so Ben is doing something interesting here. Ben is already preparing his argument to counter a pro-choice stance, right? Because he could have just explained what he thinks about the situation, right? He was given like a thought experiment. A person collapses in front of you. Can you be forced to give him blood? And what Ben does, he immediately frames it in an abortion debate, essentially, because he says, I do not have a parental relationship with that person. So he's implying that if the person who collapsed would be his offspring, then he would be obliged to give him blood. Now, I think Ben, well, you know, this is in real time, so he doesn't get all the time to pause and think like I do, but I think that's a weak move on Ben's part, because it kind of shows that this is not really good faith debate, you know, like he immediately transitions the conversation to philosophically suit his views. Now, that's completely fair, of course, there's nothing wrong with it, but as someone who personally likes to have good faith conversations, it kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Can you be forced to give me blood?
No.
Do you believe that the average person should be able to be forced by the government to do something with their body?
It depends what, because that
Why
that
can
is
you
the
not be
nature of
forced
law.
to give me? Why can you not be forced to give me an organ?
Because I do not owe you a duty of care sufficient to remove an organ
Because
from
you
me.
cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own. And
I think an easier way to frame this would be that Ben doesn't have to give the theoretical dying person blood because that person's right to life does not override Ben's right to bodily autonomy and freedom. Again, as I've said, a right to life means that you are free from being killed. It does not mean that everyone has to do whatever they need to save your life. Take another example. Let's say there's a patient hospitalized I don't know, 100 kilometers from you, where you are right now. And the only way to save this guy is for you to walk all the way to him and, I don't know, sign his t-shirt or whatever. Are you obligated to do that? I mean, that person has a right to life, right? Yeah, he has a right to life, but you didn't do anything wrong to him. You didn't wrong him. You didn't kill him. You didn't create his condition. So you don't have to do everything in your power to save him.
That is the crux of
because
the
I do not owe you a
argument.
duty to
because
care.
you cannot be forced to use your body to sustain my own, and that is the crux of the abortion argument. And the problem is, and it's very morally
You're ignoring the
inconsistent.
parental relationship.
But because there's a point here. There's a very morally inconsistent part to your argument, right?
Right, so Ben is taking it into the parental relationship part, and this guy is trying to make it into like bodily autonomy part. I think both are kind of missing the big point. But soon, Ben is going to pick up on what this guy is doing, and he's going to offer help, actually. He's going to offer this guy help, but we'll see what happens.
Out of here.
Well, no, it's
if
actually,
you hit
it's
into
not
me,
the, it's actually
yes,
not
it
the
is,
same
but
argument.
it is. If you
Now Ben is starting to figure out what's happening. He's starting to figure out that this guy's argument is flawed and that there is a much better version of it. I think Ben knows it, is going to mention it also in a second, if I remember correctly.
You
Okay,
cannot
that's
be
not
forced to
actually
use your body
how
to sustain
abortion
my
works.
own.
An abortion includes a pre-existing physical connection between the two bodies. So a better example would be the so-called dead violinist example. Or
Exactly, that's the better example. I'm going to tell you the story. This is a thought experiment by Philippa Foot. I think she was a British philosopher. Is she still alive? I think she isn't. Philippa Foot has this famous thought experiment. Imagine that one day you wake up connected to a violinist or whatever, okay? The violinist is dying, and essentially the only reason that this violinist is alive is that she's connected to you with some sort of life support. If you remain connected to the violinist for 9 months, her disease will go away and she will be healthy. But right now, you're forced to be connected to her. And if you remove the connection, then the violinist will die. This is a way better thought experiment than what that guy was suggesting. And Ben actually helps him. He tries to help him hone his argument. It's too shame that these people here are mostly here to talk at Ben instead of talk with him. But Ben is actually offering this guy help. Because here's why the violinist example is better than the blood transfusion example. The blood transfusion doesn't have a connection between the two parties, okay? The violinist does. So if you need a blood transfusion and I refuse to give it, you know, I didn't really do anything to you. Actually, you just died and I chose not to interfere. That's like my right. But if we are connected, as in the violinist thought experiment, then if I remove the connection, the violinist dies. That is a way better analogy to abortion, because the pregnant woman has to do something in order to kill the fetus or the baby, or however you want to call it. So this is a way better example. In this example, the mother has to do something in order to negate the child's right to life. That is the same in the violinist example. But in the blood transfusion example, the person has to not do anything for the other one lying on the floor to die.
or dying violinist example that was put forward by a philosopher, I can't remember her name. The basic idea there is that you wake up in a room and I'm connected to you, right? And you have some sort of health condition, I'm connected to you, and I'm giving you a blood transfusion. And if I remove that, you'll die. Do I have a duty not to remove it? I think there's actually a fairly decent case that I actually do have a duty.
No, you do not. You do not have a duty to be forced to. No,
why are you defining my moral position?
You do not have a duty.
Okay, so that was a very weak response. He was not listening, and he was not trying to consider how this was better than this example was better than the one he was given. What this person should have said is, well, he should have listened instead of being focused on talking. Let's start with that. And then he could use this example to show that once a woman is connected to a fetus, actually, there could be a meaningful debate about, well, does the woman have a right to basically withdraw her, life support, have an abortion, essentially. And by the way, what Ben said here before means that he was actually free and willing to debate this. Right? So I think this guy really blew it here, but I'm not hating on anyone, he blew it. But here's the interesting part about the violinist example. Famously, it's well known as a pro-choice thought experiment, because most people, when they think about that, when they think about the violinist, they think to themselves, well, you are perfectly within your rights to withdraw life support from the violinist, even if it means that he will die or she will die, because, well, you know, you didn't consent to being connected to him or something like that. And that obviously translates very well into abortion. But here's the thing. This really isn't that much of a pro-abortion argument, because it doesn't show that abortion is good, right? Or that the pro-life stance is bad. All it does is show that in certain conditions, an abortion could be completely morally justified. That is what it shows. In order to show that abortion is always justified, one would have to take a utilitarian position, which I'm not going to get into, but there are also some good philosophers that have given this very interesting thoughts. So this is me shadowboxing with Ben Shapiro in place of this student or kid or guy here. I hope you guys liked it, and I think a good faith debate between two parties can reach way better conclusions and understandings and thoughts rather than, you know, just speaking at each other as opposed to speaking with each other. Thanks for sticking with me, and have a good one. Bye-bye.